Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Audit Committee, the first meeting of this municipal year. Start with points on safety. The traditional point on fire safety, I don't believe that there is a fire drill planned.
No fire drill plan, Chair.
So if there is an alarm, leave by the safest exit, probably the one by the front entrance, and assemble between the cathedral and the library. Also, a point on heat. It's not quite as bad as it was a couple of days ago, but it's still hotter than you'd expect. So if anyone needs to leave to get more water or to have a breath of different air, then please do that. But thank you. So we'll start with introductions. My name's Rob Logan. I'm the chair of this committee, and our members will introduce themselves now, starting with Nick.
Hello there, Councillor Nicholas Coombs, Westbury and Henley's Vice Chair.
Hello, Councillor Ed Fraser, Green Party Councillor for Eastville Ward.
Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys Ward.
Councillor Patrick McAllister, representing Hotwells and Harbside Ward. I am substituting for Councillor Stone today.
Councillor Jonathan Hacker, Stockwood Ward.
Fabian.
Councillor Fabian Beckles, Labour Party Councillor for St George Troopers Hill.
Jo Williams, Independent Member of the Committee.
Peter Bray, Independent Member of the Committee.
So thank you, everyone. I think we are expecting James slightly later, so that'll be good. Great to see Patrick for a guest return appearance. I won't ask officers to introduce themselves now, but I will ask you to introduce yourselves if you introduce an item, so that people know who we are. Because fabulously, we are being recorded, so the cameras are in use. So both of our viewers downstairs in the committee room will be able to see us in a glorious Technicolor, and we are not reliant on the good fortune of members of the public to record for ourselves, although we are very grateful of that having been done for the last few years. So thank you to you, Dan. In terms of membership as well, thank you for the substitution. I'm also aware I have apologies received from Councillor Blenkinsop, who is not here today.
That's correct, Chair, yeah.
Okay. And I'd also like to say I'm very grateful to all the work of all committee members. So I'm conscious that some people have stepped down and some roles have changed since the last full council, and welcome to the new members that we have. Also, it's not exactly a substitution or a change, but we have a different clerk today. So I'm very grateful to Jeremy for stepping in, because Alison is not here this week. So we have we have a lot of items which I think will take a short amount of time, because items. Before we get to those, item 3 is the declaration of interest. So if any members have any particular additional or interest they'd like to declare or that are relevant to today's, can they please do so? David.
It's, as far as I know, not relevant to any item so far, but I am a non-executive director of Gorham Homes, and it might pop up in some conversation.
Thank you, Chair. As David has declared that he's a non-executive director of Gorham Homes, I'll also declare that I'm a non-executive director of Bristol Waste. I'm not sure if it will come up on the agenda, but
thank you for rising to the challenge, John.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
So thank you for that. So I propose to deal with items 4, 5, 6 and 7 together. Essentially, they are, in a moment, that they are essentially for noting the decisions made by full council, which is constituting the membership of this committee, the chair and vice chair of this committee, and the membership of the Values and Ethics Committee. Most of those things are not up to us to decide. As a committee, we're not electing those positions today, but we are noting that they are the situation that we have been given for the next municipal year. You had a comment, David?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, I'm going to complicate it slightly. The Green Party would like to propose that Councillor Stone is added to the Values and Ethics Subcommittee instead of myself, so that there is some non-male representation on that committee. And we feel it's quite important that there is more diversity on that committee. So Councillor Stone will be replacing me on that committee.
I think that's a tremendous idea. I'm going to look to my left briefly. Is that within our power to appoint?
Yeah, well, the appointment is something the party can do, Chair. So, yeah, it's just... Sorry, I should have my mic on. Yeah, it's simply a noting of the fact that you're going to be replacing the appointment. So, just to clarify, Councillor Stone is replacing who? Councillor Wilcox?
Councillor Wilcox?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, you. Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, that's fine. So, it's just it will just be recorded as a noting that the Green Group are making that appointment, that changing the appointment. That's all, Chair.
But that doesn't need reporting to full council. That can just be reported here.
No, it's within it because it's a subcommittee. It's,
Okay.
It's the committee
Understood.
makes that decision, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David. I thought that would be even more straightforward, but that's. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for your service on the Values and Ethics Committee. Thank you. The dates have been shared for. Hello, James. The dates have been shared for the committee meetings this municipal year, so I hope members are aware of those and are largely able to attend. Again, we're just noting that those dates have been shared with us. Did you have a comment, Fabian?
Yeah, 29th of September I won't be here, but apart from that, we can sort something out in time if we need a substitute.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, members make us aware if particular dates are particular problems for individuals, but I think overall they should be correct. We also have item 9, the Audit Committee Terms of Reference, which is also here for noting. It's useful to have those shared with the committee at the beginning of each municipal year to make us to remind us why we're here. Again, I don't think they're in our control. But it's useful to have them circulated. Does anyone want
They're appointed by full. They're approved by full council, Chair. Yeah.
Does anyone have any comments on them? Yes, Ed.
Just to clarify, I'm 99.9% sure it's the case, but there haven't been any changes to these terms of reference since the last time we saw them in 2025?
That is my understanding.
Great, thank you.
So, is the committee prepared to note all of those formal points in one go? Okay, thank you. Moving then to the minutes of the last meeting and then the action list following them. Do members have any comments on the minutes? No? Good.
Chair, excuse me. It's not a comment on the minutes, as I wasn't here, but for the last meeting, of course. But I didn't quite know where else to raise this. I just wanted to flag that I think the numbering of some of the papers in this meeting is off by 1, which caused us a bit of confusion, certainly on the public website, and it caused us a bit of confusion when referring to mod.gov as well.
Okay.
I think some of the item 16 is labelled as item 15 and so on. So I remember that being a bit of an issue when I was permanently on audit previously, so I was just wondering if that could be addressed for the accessibility of
Thank you, Patrick. That's really helpful. And we can note that.
Yes, I'll mention it.
Okay, great. Right. Moving then to the action list. There are a number of items that have been updated by officers, which we're very grateful for. Do members have any questions or clarifications on any of the items in the action list? Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think there was a query around item 11 on the action list, which is actually it's not item 11, sorry, action 10. Action 10 on the list. Sorry, action 8. My notes are slightly mixed up. There was a query around what metric is being referred to in terms of debt management, and the metric that was being referred to is debtor days outstanding, which is the amount owed divided by the amount invoiced multiplied by the number of days in the period. So that was the query from the officer, and I've just provided the answer.
That's not normally the way round it goes, Jonathan. If we need to record that, do you want to say that more slowly so that the clerk can capture what you're clarifying?
It is being webcast, Chair, so I probably can pick it up anyway.
You can follow it later. Yeah. Okay. So you're happy that now that has now been clarified, Jonathan?
Yes. Well, I assume that because that's basically in response to a query raised by an officer, and that's my answer to it. So if it's webcast, then it's been captured.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's tremendous. David.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions about the action sheet. On page 32, which I think is action sheet question 6, about the intangible assets. I'm still a little confused about why, for instance, Microsoft licensing does not have the same intangible asset notification as the NEC housing software. We spend nearly 2.2 million pounds per year on Microsoft licensing, and I think it fits in well with the concept of the net book value of the NEC software being 3.5 million. It should be something that's actually logged in that way, as opposed to a random piece of software that we might use in one particular department. So can I have a better explanation about why Microsoft licensing isn't included in that, please?
So I think the specific question, therefore, is why do we treat the intangible assets from Microsoft assets differently to the NEC? I'm going to look in this way to ask if anyone is able to comment today, or we can follow up afterwards if that's okay. Okay, thank you, Sam.
Okay. So it's an operating cost, the licenses is a revenue cost, so it's ongoing as part of a revenue expenditure. So the NEC housing would have been part of the delivery of that system and the build and everything that's included in that to deliver that system. But Microsoft licenses are ongoing, so they're not included as assets, they're operational expenditure. Yes, it's
So,
revenue and capital,
because it's I didn't expect the NEC software to be a £3.5 million one-off cost. Is it a yearly cost?
No, so that is the one-off cost of delivering the system.
Right, okay.
Yes.
So what's the yearly cost of NEC?
I can take that away.
I'd be interested to know that,
I'll
please.
take that one away.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Sally. So just so I've understood that, we record an intangible asset when we've made a capital investment in delivering that, whereas if it's simply a revenue cost of using a service, then we wouldn't.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chair, I have one more thing, if I can beg your indulgence. On page 34, line item 9 of the action sheet, it appears the answer is incomplete. It looks like it's cropped off at the bottom. Can we have the whole answer, please?
Yes, you are correct. So it should be possible to retrieve that answer and then to share it with members of the committee.
I'll make sure that's done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We had some other comments on those. Peter, were you happy with that analysis? Ed, did you have a question? No? Okay, so Nick.
Thank you. Action number 2 has not been answered from last time. Now, we don't have anyone from the housing team here, but we do have the chief executive, so I think it's worth restating that the audit committee were concerned to learn at the time that everyone bidding for housing had to create new email addresses for themselves because the system had failed in a way which I'd previously never thought possible. And I think we're also subsequently concerned not to have answers from the housing directors when questions have been raised. So I'll just mention that in front of the council leaders.
That's certainly a really important point and something which both this committee and the Housing Committee have commented on. So I think the action is to make sure that we've got an answer to that question, which will be circulated to members. Yes. Sorry, were there other comments? Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Action 10, I just wanted to thank officers for providing the benchmarking data on collection rates for council tax and business rates. I think that this is very helpful information. As far as council tax is concerned, it shows that Bristol is slightly better than average, and for business rates, also slightly better than average. I wondered if this information could be included in the debt management reports in the future, which we receive every 6 months, because I do think it is helpful in putting the council's performance into context.
Thank you for drawing that to our attention, Jonathan. I think that's right. I think it would be useful to include that in future reports, future annual reports, if that's possible. Thank you. Right. We would move to Chair's business. Most of the things I wanted to update we dealt with at the beginning, which is particularly the update of the membership. So I don't think there's anything else we wanted to update at this point. Which brings us to public forum. Some information has been published, so we will move to that. I think it's just a statement rather than a question.
Yes, it is, Chair. Yeah.
So, Dan, you have up to half an hour to read that statement. So you can go as slowly as you like. And thank you for standing near the microphones, which I am told are on.
Let's see how this works. Oh, good. Okay. The purpose of officer decision notices is to create a record of the officer's reasoning at the time the decision was made. It is meant to expose the officer's decision-making process to later scrutiny, rather than merely recording the decision. This council does not care to follow the laws that make decision notices be required. One example of a known decision that was not published is the decision taken in December 2023 to procure the C365 software. I think that leads to an interesting conversation about how the spending was approved through the finance and the other teams. There's another missing decision. In late 2022, in response to the strike by housing workers, there was a change in working practice. The council stopped doing housing stock surveys. Settling a strike by reducing the workload of the housing officers should have had an officer decision notice published for it. I've put in an FOI request for this decision notice. The council is simply ignoring the request. I need to express this in terms of value for money, so how about this? The IT system should have been done by now. Not having it done increased council costs both directly through additional licence fees for the legacy software and also from the loss of revenue due to council homes sitting empty as voids due to the lack of a suitable tool to manage them. I would very much like some assurance that reasonable progress was made on the IT project during 2023 and 2024. To be explicit, I would like reassurance whether the allocated funding was spent as intended or whether any of it was left unspent or redirected to other uses. If you think it's outrageous to suggest that officers might simply fail to work on a properly made decision, I refer you to the approval given in June 2023 to carry out an enhanced stock condition survey programme. That programme just simply did not start until 2024 after the judgment by the regulator of social housing. If the IT project had started in 2023, officers would have been talking to software vendors. One of the first things the vendors would have asked is, what is the council's plan for the change in fire safety laws in September 2023? And the officers in the council would have realised that Barton House was going to be a problem. But there would have been months to make a plan in a calm and deliberative manner. Instead, there was a panicked and unplanned evacuation which cost millions of pounds and traumatised residents. If that doesn't represent a severe failure to deliver value for money, then I don't know what would. How about the children who have developed asthma from living in mouldy council homes due to the ongoing lack of an IT system that tracks data about which homes have mould problems and what needs to be done about it? I think we've significantly failed to deliver value for money for those people. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for your statement. So we now move to item 14, which is the work programme. This is mostly for information. This is to advise members the items that we expect to be coming to each of the committee meetings during the year. But there is one decision to be made, not necessarily today, but it could be discussed today, which is one of the items on the 28th of July, under Corporate Risk Report Q1, there is Corporate Risk Register Deep Dive. That is an opportunity for us to identify an item, probably from the Corporate Risk Register, that we want some more information about. So if members would like to think about that, we don't need to make that decision today, but if members would like to contact me or the Chief Internal Auditor afterwards with suggestions, as well as any comments made today, that would be very helpful. We're obviously discussing the Corporate Risk Register later in the meeting, so what would be ideal is if we could keep that in mind and potentially identify items that we would like to discuss in more detail. As I say, we don't have to make that decision today, but we might want to, or we might want to suggest some possibilities, which maybe the officers might investigate the feasibility of. But that is the one item that is slightly a placeholder, or is an opportunity for us to expand items that we would bring to this committee, whereas the other items are items that would normally be brought to the committee at each of those sessions. So keep that in mind when we get to the end of the last item at the meeting. Is there anything else people would like to comment on the work programme? Jo.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wondered, I mean, I'm not quite sure where to raise this. Maybe I should wait until the next item, actually, which is the external auditor's plan. But I will have a question. I do have a question about when are we going to look at the draft audited accounts. But we'll possibly come to that in the next item.
I think that would be dealt with in the next item.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Yes, Ed.
Thanks very much. So just in the work programme, one thing I've noted is that pretty much all of the meetings have 6 or 7 items of them, with the exception of the meeting on 29th September. We've got, I think, 10 items listed there. And I'm just a bit concerned about the amount of time that we'll then be able to give to effectively scrutinise those items, particularly given that, as it stands towards the end of that meeting, would be scrutiny relating to Bristol Waste Limited and Gorham Homes. And that will be having the auditor's progress report coming earlier this year than it did last year, which is, you know, a welcome and necessary step. I'm just a bit concerned about the sequencing of that. Is there anything we can do, either A, about the length of that meeting / dividing it up so there's appropriate time available for scrutiny, or B, if there were any items from that meeting that could be brought forward to July or pushed back to November, just to smooth out the pacing a little bit and make sure we have got adequate time?
That's a really helpful point, Ed. I think there are a number of those items are there for particular reasons. So both those items need to come at the same time, but also the statement on the AGS, I believe, has to come at that time. So there aren't many things that we could move, but do you think that is something we should give some consideration to? Yeah. Thank you for raising that, Ed. We'll review that and we'll get back to you if there are any changes. if we're happy to note the work programme as it currently is, we can then move to Grant Thornton for the update on the external audit.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So item 15 on your agenda is our project management plan.
Pete, could I ask you just to introduce yourself?
Sorry, yeah. Peter Barber, Director from Grant Thornton and Bristol City Council's External Auditor. And item 15 is our project management plan for 25-26. So I'm conscious that on the agenda, I think this item is described as the external audit plan for 5-6. So just to be clear, the plan itself was brought to the previous meeting of this committee. I presented that in March, and we had a helpful discussion on the content. That is a document that we produce every year that sets out our approach to discharging our responsibilities. This is a new document that we are introducing across our local government portfolio for 25-26. Nationally, there are 500 councils, police authorities, fire authorities, other local government bodies that are subject to audit, and within Grant Thornton we do about 180 of them. No doubt members are aware of the challenges within the sector in terms of delivering timely audits, and you will also be aware of moves by government to bring forward the reporting deadlines going forward. And this letter, as I said, is being rolled out across all our local government audits. So it's not just Bristol City Council, that sets out in a bit more detail and puts a bit of flesh on the bones from the audit plan I presented in March in terms of respective roles and responsibilities for delivering that timely opinion audit. So you will see in the letter that we talk about the deadlines, and for 25-26, audit is a retrospective exercise, so we're right in the midst now of the 25-26 audit. The deadline is the end of January, but the following year, for 26-27, that deadline is brought forward quite considerably to the end of November, which we think is a very big challenge across the sector. And in order to ensure that we're ready for that earlier deadline, we are attempting to do a dry run this year of bringing forward the deadlines across a number of our authorities. Now, in the south, we have 40 local government audits, give or take, and it is impossible for us as a Bristol team to start all those audits as soon as they arrive on our desk, so we prioritise, and we do those organisations that we think are best equipped to produce timely accounts and support that with good quality working papers and answer timely queries. We prioritise those and we start them as soon as we get the accounts. Bristol City Council is one of those authorities that we deem capable of producing those accounts early and supporting the audit process. So you are in phase one. And what this letter seeks to set out is our desire to undertake that audit by the end of September. So we're bringing it forward considerably. And we did discuss at the March meeting of this committee some of the challenges that have existed at Bristol City Council in the prior year and the additional fee. And clearly on the back of that, we have had a wash-up with finance officers. We've discussed what needs to change on both sides. We are desperate to ensure that the audit is delivered efficiently. And this is a supplementary document that sets out for you a bit more detail about how we're going to do that. So when we do get your accounts, anything within those accounts is subject to audit. So potentially 200 pages, but as I said previously, we prioritise and we focus on the risk areas. We do a substantive audit, so we don't do controls testing and then do a bit of testing on the actual numbers. The most efficient way is for us to get those accounts and check the numbers in the primary statements and the supplementary notes. And that's what we'll do again this year. And in this letter, in discussion with finance officers, we have requested that we get the draft accounts by the 22nd of June. The deadline nationally is the end of June, but in consultation with officers, there is a view that that can be brought forward, and that's really important for us because we need to make an early start on this audit and get through the work so that we can switch, hopefully in September, to our phase 2 audits. So we have resource booked in early. We have resource that's available in 2 weeks' time. We have a big team, and there are certain things we can do ahead of receipt of those draft accounts. We've got the annual governance statement on the agenda today. That's one thing that we can look at. But we need those accounts by the 22nd of June, and we need them supported by working papers. Our team will come in physically. We'll do a hybrid approach. We'll do a bit of work on site. We'll do a bit of work back in the office. And we will look to get through that audit by front-loading the team, and we will look to get through that audit by the middle of September. So I've put resources in until the middle of September, and that should give us time, with a fair wind, to bring our audit findings report to the September meeting, which I think is the 22nd from recollection. So I was going to make an observation about the previous item on the agenda, but subject to this discussion, one of the things I would request is that we remove the progress report from the September work plan and replace it with our audit findings report. And you will be aware that our responsibilities are twofold. So it's not just the accounts, it's VFM. And we would also look to align the reporting of our VFM work, which is captured in our auditor's annual report, to that same September meeting. So it would be quite a substantial item on that September meeting. But I think if we could get that work done, it would be fantastic for the credentials of the council in terms of actually delivering to the earlier deadline. I think from recollection, in 4-5, there was only 5 councils nationally that were signed off by the end of September, 1%. And what we're looking to do this year is really streamline the approach. And this letter sets out that in more detail. And you'll note that in this letter, for the more observant of you, there is an appendix with certain KPIs that we will monitor, including delivery by the 22nd of June of those accounts. There's KPIs for us as well in terms of reporting. There is also reference to an Appendix B. Now, I've not put Appendix B within this report because it's a very detailed Excel spreadsheet that breaks down all the individual elements that make up our audit process, responsibilities, timelines, who's taking responsibility for that on our side and your side. It will need a little bit of adaptation to reflect annual leave, etc. But that is the core document that we will use to monitor progress. So really, this is here for information. This is a letter sent to your Section 151 officer. Section 151 officer and finance officers have accepted it. They think it's deliverable. It's stretching, it's challenging, but we think that's important. And subject to receiving those accounts as soon as possible, and if they're here before the 22nd of June, even better. I am confident that we can do this working effectively with you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. That's really comprehensive, thank you. Could I ask you one question at the beginning, which is how unusual are we? In terms of, I'm pleased that we are trying to meet those deadlines a year earlier, and it's helpful for us as much as yourself to work out quite how to do that and how stretching that is. But what proportion of authorities are taking that approach? Are we unusual in trying to meet that deadline this year?
So we are going through this discussion with all our local government bodies nationally. And all those that are in phase 1, we will be having similar discussions with them, because the aspiration is we don't wait until the end of June. And there were a number of councils, and there have been for a number of years, where councils haven't delivered their accounts by the end of June. The default has to be that you have a statutory responsibility to produce your accounts by the end of June. No excuses. So we are not just asking for that deadline to be met everywhere. On our phase 1 audits, we're looking to bring that forward where possible. And that's the discussion we've had, because whilst the 22nd might not sound very different than the 30th, it does give us that extra bit of time, because we do need to get the audit done, and we do need to move on to our phase 2 audits in the middle of September to deliver by the national deadline of November in 2 years' time. So if we were to get that work done by the end of September, I think you would be in a minority, a small minority of organisations that got their accounts signed by the end of September. But there will be a lot of audits starting in the next few weeks. The question is how many of them are actually done. And what we're trying to do is make sure there is more accountability on both sides, because ultimately we want to be very clear on our respective responsibilities, and if there's any slippage on either side, what corrective action can be taken. Because it would be great for me to turn up here in September and give all the positive messages about a clean set of accounts, materially accurate, and here's your opinion. It makes it very difficult when I have to come along and say, it's not done, we're only 70% through, I'm going to have to identify more resource, it's not going to be available until December, I'm going to charge you extra for it, and we haven't got a set of accounts. So I don't want to be in that position, and no doubt the council doesn't either. So It is a really stretching target, end of September, but if we don't try, we'll never know.
Okay, thank you. I think there were a number of comments. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Peter, for the report. Yeah, really good to see the deadlines being accelerated. I must say that the information that's contained in Appendix A, I think that would be very useful, and I think I'm right in saying that I don't think we've ever been presented with that information before, and I think that that's a really useful tool for monitoring progress. So thank you for that. And so I assume that we will be receiving updates on this, performance against the various targets as the audit continues. And it's good to see that you've got a target for delivery of the accounts to the auditors, which is ahead of the statutory target. Will the accounts be uploaded to the council's website and made available to us at that time, or will that be done on the statutory deadline?
So the plan at the moment is to send you the draft statement of accounts in the week commencing the following week. So yeah, dates, it's the following week. And we had planned to do a briefing note for you to come around with a PowerPoint presentation. But what we wanted to discuss today was how you wanted to do the briefing. So would you like us to send the briefing note PowerPoint round with the draft accounts and then give you some time to read through it? Or would you like us to do a briefing? We could do that because there's no meeting in June, so we could do that online for you. Or you could wait till the 28th of July and we could meet an hour ahead of the agenda for Audit Committee and do that then. So that was one of the questions.
Just to test my colleagues' views, my instinct is that we have a separate briefing about it. What do you think? Sorry,
just a point of order. I'm struggling to hear several different speakers. So your mic, and your mic. So I don't know if there's an audio issue. What was the question again, please?
So it's a question of when the...
So we will circulate the draft statement of accounts. So we'll send it to the auditors on the 22nd, and then we'll circulate it for members of the committee the following week with a briefing note. So the question is, would you like us to do a Teams meeting for you because there's no June committee? So we could do a Teams briefing on the week and the week after the accounts are circulated, to give you time to peruse it, or we could do something separately.
Can we have those options written down, please? So I'm just not processing what the options are.
I think the point being made is that you will be delivering the accounts around the 22nd of June, and therefore around the 29th of June, you will circulate them to us for our site. And the question is, should we have an online councillors briefing when those accounts are shared with us, or wait until the next committee meeting? I think that my instinct is that we have a separate briefing about it, because they will need some explaining. I think I would rather have someone explain them as well as people read through them. And I don't really want to add another hour to the next committee meeting.
Okay.
Okay, that's as to when that meeting takes place is fine. Yeah. My request would be that we receive the documentation ahead of the meeting so we have time to read and prepare questions. That's the most critical element.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Ed. Thank you. Sorry.
And then Joe. Well, if it's a briefing, I suppose it's going to be about an hour, isn't it? Can I request it's after about 4 or 5 o'clock? Because I work and others, I'm sure, do.
Yep. It's fine.
Yeah, we will be in contact through the clerk around the best time to schedule that. Sorry, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Sally, I wanted to ask a bit more of a more immediate question, actually, if I may. In relation to Appendix A, and you have agreed to meet, or to certainly do our utmost to meet these deadlines. Can I just ask you, can you tell us today, being it's the 28th of May, so, you know, we're 28 days after, we're 2 months after the year end, we're just a month thereabouts before this deadline of 22nd of June. Is it possible for you to just comment on the position now? And then my second question, which is kind of related, is can you tell us a little bit about the risk analysis you might have done in relation to meeting that deadline, and indeed these other quality sort of indicators that we are looking to hit as well? Can you just tell us a little bit about the position now? Thank you.
So we're very much ahead of the game on where we were for 24-25, in that a lot of the planning work has already been completed and sent across. So we did that during March. So Grant Thornton have got all of that. So there's lots of evidence that we provide around controls and transactions and things out of the ledger. So we've done a lot of that work ahead of the game. We've also standardised a lot of the working papers, and they automatically now complete the statement of accounts, the main statements and the notes. So that's automated and just flows through. So we are very much ahead of the game on where we were. We also have a fully resourced team this year, which we haven't had certainly didn't last year. So the team are well aware of what's required of them. They're aware of these KPIs, and so we're resourced to meet those. So we are much more comfortable with that. It is a stretch, and it always, you know, it's designed to be. We know that. But I think in terms of risk of where we are, there shouldn't be anything new coming out of the accounts this year. We've obviously, IFRS 16 was last year. So we've made a lot of progress on the work required there. Grant Thornton will look at our working papers and just check for completeness and make sure we've covered everything on that. So, you know, we don't think there's anything that's going to come from there. There's always a possibility that something might come out and we might have to relook at it. But yeah, we're pretty much covered on that side. And the other risk is obviously we've got the NEC housing system as well, which was new for us. So that was part of the way through the year. So, but we've been looking at the system, and we've got numbers in the ledger. So yeah, we're as comfortable as we can be at this stage.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Question from Nick.
Thank you. The question is, as client, why would we choose to do this? So I note that the letter was sent to the finance team, not the audit team, 3 weeks ago, but it hasn't been integrated into our audit plan. As we've just witnessed, we've just accepted a programme that's completely at odds with what our external auditors have proposed, and these two things have been happening in parallel without any communication, it seems. And what's been outlined by our external auditor, they would like to get all of our stuff done first so as they can get on with the more complicated audits later. And if we're not able to meet the more challenging than normal timelines that they're giving us, then we'll just go to the back of the queue. December, we'll miss the statutory deadline and they'll charge us extra fees. So it seems to me that everything is to the benefit of the internal management of the external auditor than to us as client for getting our audit done. We've got to meet other people's deadlines, and what's the benefit for that?
Thank you.
While you're thinking, Sally, I don't think that's quite true. We've known for a while that we wanted to meet the accelerated deadline, and I think there are benefits to us of trying to meet that this year and failing if we do, and finding out why, or being successful if we are, rather than failing to meet a statutory deadline that is more stretching than we thought it would be if we try next year. So that was my understanding of why we were meeting the accelerated deadline this year, and I for one think that's a sensible thing to do. But would you have any other comments on that, sir?
Yes, it is more accelerated. It's in the interest of everybody to finalise the previous year and move on. So we would very much want to do that so we can move on with actually the current financial year. Very much so. I think, as you said, the government has set these aspirations. They want us to go back to the position we were in a few years ago, where we were actually completing all of these audits to that similar time frame. But during those 4 or 5 years there, with various reasons, obviously they had to extend the deadline. So it is bringing us back to in the position where we were a few years ago, actually. So, but very much, as I say, I think it's in all of our interest to move on. Resourcing an audit is intensive and, you know, obviously takes a lot of our time, but there's improvements and things that we want to be doing.
Just on that deadline, so the government deadline for this financial year is January. For the following financial year is November. So the latest the government is proposing is 30th of November. But the target that we've been given is the 30th of September, so 2 months ahead of even the fastest legal requirement.
We do still have to, obviously, present the final accounts and the final opinion to this audit committee, and we have to have the accounts signed and published on our website by that day. So that's why it gives us the time to do that.
So I think there's a comment from Grant Thornton.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, if I went back 7, 8 years pre-COVID, September was a deadline, and 90+% of authorities were meeting that deadline. This is public money, and it's the importance of accountability is there in terms of you being able to demonstrate to your public, your stakeholders, that they have the confidence over the public funds that's being incurred in providing those services. So that is really critical, and we have a role in that, and so does the finance team, the council. Now, MHCLG have been very clear that the current arrangements, in their view, are broken, and that they want to get back to that pre-COVID position. And therefore, we are being put under pressure by government as a firm, as the biggest provider of external audit, to bring forward the number of audits that we're signing off. Authorities, and not the case of Bristol, that haven't had their accounts signed off for many years or have had delays, and there are a number of them out there, are being put under increasing pressure by government for this, because where's the accountability? And also, when audits take longer to do and are stretched out over a longer period of time, it's more input from us as auditors, which results in more cost, and it is a massive commitment for your finance officers. As Sally's mentioned, you're retrospectively supporting the audit process, which is far more involved than it was even 5 years ago. We're going into far more detail for various reasons that have been discussed previously. And if we can get in and out quickly, in an efficient manner, it frees up your finance officers to do the day-to-day tasks in terms of managing the in-year budget, medium-term financial planning, and all the other things that are associated with an effective, well-run organisation that has control over its finances. So, you know, this issue about it being, you know, dictated, it is absolutely implicit that we do this and we stretch ourselves and we get in and out. You know, I won't sign until I'm ready to sign, and I've got the assurances over all the numbers in those accounts, and it takes time, but I'm desperate to get out because I want to move on and do other audits with my team, and I also want to give you the resource back within your finance team to do all the other things that they're grappling with at the same time.
So have you reduced your fees if this is cheaper than the alternative?
So the fees are set by public sector audit appointments. There's a scale fee that indicates what is achievable in terms of an efficient audit, and it does assume timely production of accounts, good working papers, prompt response to queries. You have a scale fee. We have charged considerably more than the scale fee in recent years because it's taken far longer. And I know that we've had previous discussions about the significant additional fee that we've charged in prior years. Clearly, if we deliver in September, you would hope that those additional fees weren't forthcoming to the same amount.
So I think that's probably enough on that item. A question from Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. It was a comment, really. Yeah, I'd like actually to support what the external auditor has said. I think that it's a good thing that the deadlines are being accelerated, and these deadlines are actually still sort of further behind than what you would expect to see in the private sector. And I see no reason why the public sector shouldn't actually try to improve its performance to align itself more closely with the private sector in this respect.
So that's a good challenge, Jonathan. Let's see. Any other questions from colleagues on this section? Peter.
Is that on? Yeah. It's really on Appendix A, which I guess is, broadly speaking, where we are now. I guess, again, from my own background, bearing in mind that I'm relatively new to this committee, one of the things that I always would find quite challenging for me in the past, looking at reports, is when anything is termed to be reasonable. And reasonable is a word used quite extensively through Appendix A. And I'm just wondering what reasonable means and whether this, your committee are reassured that that word is indicative of what they want to achieve or want to be seen to have achieved. Does that make sense? And it's just what criteria is used for reasonable.
That's a good challenge. I'm not sure we need to discuss it further now, but it's a good thing to bear in mind. Any other questions before we end this item? One from Joe.
Just briefly, Chair, just to repeat really that, getting timely information out to the public from public sector bodies is a key part of our accountability. And, even when these accounts do go out, which will be whenever you said, I'm not going to try and remember that now, is it September? That's going to be still 6 months after the end of the financial year. And that's a great improvement, of course, on the past. But we can't be going on churning out information that's historical to our public. It renders the information pretty useless, actually. So this has to be applauded, in my view. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to Grant Thornton. If there are no other comments, we'll note that report. Peter, you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but equally, I'm sure you have some other commitments as well. We will move to item 15, which is the Chief Internal Auditor's report. On a point of meeting management, I'd normally want to break about an hour and a half into a meeting. I'm conscious it's a bit hotter and less comfortable than normal, so I would probably have a break earlier than that. So I was wondering if we might want to have a break now. So if we could come back by 3 o'clock, I think having refilled our water bottles, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. So we're going to move to item 15, which is Simba's annual report as Chief Internal Auditor. If you like the word reasonable, Peter, this is going to occur quite often in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Simba, over to you to introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members and colleagues. Chair, I normally take this report as read, but I would like to highlight a few key points from this report. This report presents the Chief Internal Auditor's annual conclusion on the Council's internal control, risk management arrangements, governance framework for the year ended 31st March 2026. The committee will be aware that providing this conclusion is a mandatory requirement for the global internal audit standards which govern the delivery of internal audit services in organizations. This conclusion also informs the annual governance statement, which is a separate item on this agenda. Chair, my conclusion is informed by a range of assurances, including outcomes from internal audit work, management assurances, and the reporting and monitoring of agreed management actions. For ease of reference, members, the sources of these assurances are set out in Section 2 of Annexure 1, starting from page 51. This report also brings together some of the information that we have already received throughout the year. So, Chair, having considered all the assurances available to me, my conclusion is that in 2025-26, the Council had an adequate and effective framework of governance, risk management, and internal control, which provides reasonable assurance that the Council's objectives are being achieved and that risks are being managed to an acceptable level. I fully explained my rationale in reaching this conclusion in Section 2 of Annexure 1, which is on page 52. This conclusion is similar to the one I gave last year and recognizes the improvements that have been made since 2023. You will recall that in 23-24, I gave a limited assurance opinion. Chair, in reaching this conclusion, I also recognize that Bristol City Council is a large and complex organization faced with many challenges that may result in some risk crystallizing. Alongside this, I've identified some areas that require improvement, which are highlighted in Annexure A. So, Chair, Appendices A and B provide the supporting evidence for this report. Looking ahead, to maintain this positive trajectory, it is essential that we continue to focus on getting the basics right, supported by a regular oversight and effective prioritization of governance, compliance and risk-related matters. My view, Chair, is that the current work that is happening in the Council, exploring opportunities brought by technology, will help with the stronger continuous monitoring, better management information, and more timely assurance, which is key in sustaining these improvements. Appendix A lists audits that receive limited assurance opinion, indicating where areas require improvement. Chair, there's no intention to discuss those in detail. The committee has received some of these reports in previous meetings, and the remaining ones will come to the July meeting. In Appendix A, I also indicate advisory engagements where I do not provide any assurance, because advisory engagements do not have opinions due to their lack of substantive testing, but these are intended to support management in achieving improvements. Unlike the usual audits that we do, the advisory work is more collaborative, forward-looking, that is working with management to provide life-critical friend advice rather than raise issues when they've already crystallized 18 or 12 months later. So that work is very, very important because it helps us to raise issues when they are still current so that management can do something about them. I can confirm that the audit work is undertaken in accordance with the global internal audit standards. So in terms of my independence, Chair, I can confirm that nothing has occurred during the year that has impaired my independence or objectivity. I have no other matters to escalate to the committee beyond those already covered in my report. Chair, I'll end by thanking my internal audit colleagues and all the managers for their hard work, commitment over the past year. I also want to extend the thanks to the Audit and Risk Board and the Chief Exec. Glad Nick is in the room, the audit committee members, and you, Chair, for the continued and effective collaboration. That good working relationship puts me in a strong position to confidently provide the annual conclusion. I'll stop here, Chair, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Simba. That's a very comprehensive summary. We've got a forest of hands, so we'll start with Ed.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm going to get my accessibility gripes and grumbles out of the way straight out the door, and I'm sorry to say this is the third audit committee in a row where I've felt the need to pull up the quality of presentation, in particular of graphics, bar charts, pie charts, those kinds of things. I'll just briefly listen turn by turn. Page 53, there's a pie chart that appears to be quite poorly presented. We've got low contrast small text. We've got 3D orienting, which obscures the proportions of the numbers. I'm not sure what value that adds at all. And then there are 4 terms which aren't explained. So to the casual reader, substantial assurance won't be understood. To myself, advisory assurance isn't necessarily fully understood. So I'm going to ask for clarification on that particular term because it's not one that we see very often. Page 56, we've got a line graph which appears to have been a photograph taken from someone's phone and then put into the document, which is it's probably the worst offender in terms of accessibility here. There's no alternative text provided, so if I'm a visually impaired member of the public, I cannot read that part of the document at all. Page 62 to 64, we've got a list here. I think I raised this in my first audit committee this time last year, actually, that this is far too difficult to read, it's too small a typeface, there's not enough text insert in there. I realise these are not core issues in an audit, but the reason I raise them is because they obscure our ability to do our job as members and actually effectively scrutinise the material, because we're either A, distracted by having to raise these matters in a meeting, which takes time away, or B, because we then genuinely can't identify issues within the papers. So that's why I raised them. And then finally on page 65, the chart is, the selection of the chart presented shows every column as being equaling about 88%, which suggests that what's been presented, the type of chart being presented, is not the most useful type. And that's acknowledged by the fact there were 2 blue arrows pointing down to the rows, which are clearly what the reader wants us to actually pay attention to, but again, with no context provided as to why we should pay attention to those rows. So just getting those out of the way out of the bat, because I don't want to spend loads of time discussing these things today, but what I really would like to see ahead of the next meeting is a bit of a plan brought forward as to how we are going to ensure that the accessibility of those documents, particularly for members of the public who are visually impaired and neurodivergent, can actually absorb these documents, because that's a critical part of this function. On to my 2 questions. It's good to see that the 8 schools audited award reasonable assurance. This is on page 55. I wanted to ask why only 8 schools were audited this year instead of the 10, as it was last year. And then on page 57, a reference is made to £256,000 that couldn't be carried forward. And I just want to check what has happened with that money, just to make sure that it hasn't disappeared into the ether entirely. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments on the accessibility, Ed. That's really clear. That's really well taken. In terms of the specific items, you're able to comment on the figures that Ed highlights.
I think what I can answer the one to do with, I think the amount carried forward. I don't think we have any detailed view, but I think it's just the amount that needs to be carried forward in relation to the grants that could not be carried forward in the following year. I don't know whether we have the exact response, but I can provide a written response on this if we need to change. I don't think I've got the specifics here. Yeah, I will. I'll provide that. Yeah,
feedback. Okay.
And the rest of the comments, Chair, I accept. I think we need to do something on accessibility. I don't think we need to debate. I think we need just to work around how do we get that. Yeah, it's a fair point, and we will try to work around.
Absolutely. And I think, Ed, for example, your point around if you're doing a pie chart, you don't need to do it 3D. That should be a very clear principle. That it doesn't add to anything, and it's helpful to make it clearer.
I mean, I'm not going to get into the debate here about the efficiency of pie charts. I'm not sure they're efficient in any circumstance, but very happy to discuss offline with Simba or anyone else around ways that we can improve the accessible presentation of this document, because that's
really helpful, Ed. Thank you. I think we had a question from Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simba, for the report. I see that in the pie chart that has been referred to, the number of audits which which have been given limited assurance is 20%. I look back at the same chart for the previous year and it was 13%, so it appears to be going in the wrong direction. It's good in a sense that that you've been able to give an opinion of reasonable assurance, but is there ever any likelihood that you will be able to deliver an opinion of substantial assurance, or do you think that reasonable assurance is as good as it's ever going to get? I must say that I think that the fact that the number of audits with a limited assurance opinion has increased to 20% is disappointing, because I think that one is one too many, basically. But do you think reasonable assurance is as good as it's ever going to get?
Yes, I think it's... So if I've got, if we do audits, and let's say we have a very, very large number of audits concluding reasonable better, then yes, we could. But I think given the split of the reasonable and others, I think at this point, reasonable is the one that I need to give, and also given some of the things that I know and some of the things that we really need to improve. So I'm thinking that probably if the trajectory that we have in terms of making those improvements, then yes, I think if we continue the same trajectory, I think yes, there is a likelihood that, but it would depend on the work that I would have done in that year. So I wouldn't want to sit here and promise that this will change in there, but if the audit work concludes that, then yes, we can. But I am assured that there is a lot of effort and improvements being undertaken in the organization. That gives me confidence that, yeah, we're heading in the right direction.
I think the message, Jonathan, is don't hold your breath. I think, were there some comments? So do you have another question, Jonathan?
Yeah, just a quick one, please, if you don't mind. And I'll apologise in advance because this is on a specific audit which was given limited assurance, and that was the officer decision notices. I believe that audit kind of indicated that there were delays, and in some cases some quite significant delays in producing the officer decision notices. I think we've had a suggestion from a member of the public who attended this meeting, public forum, that officer decision notices perhaps weren't being issued at all, rather than just being issued late. So I wondered if that's something that could be, if that audit could be revisited.
So in terms of auditing, yes, we are going to audit that again in probably, I think, in this first half of the year. You are aware that anything that's limited assurance will be subject to a detailed audit. So yes, on that, yes, the answer is yes. We'll audit officer decisions again before the end of September this year.
Thank you.
Okay. If I could just add to that, we're currently in discussions.
Could I ask you to introduce yourself if you're speaking?
My apologies. Phil Eames, Internal Audit Manager, currently in discussion about the terms of reference for that follow-up to that audit as we speak.
Okay. So I think we had a question from Joe, and then I think David.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much, Simba, for the report. I think it's very thorough, and I'm very pleased to see a high target for the management actions completion being both set and achieved, and I think that's to be applauded. I have a question mark on page 65, please, on your diagram there, where you're focusing on asking us, or showing the reader where to focus in terms of certain areas where improvement is needed. I just wanted to ask you about the table there that sets out and how we have those 20, is it 20 assurance areas. I just wondered, how are those arrived at, please? It's page 65. It's the management assurances diagram.
That I think I'm on. So the appendix that we have given you, which shows the management assurances, is the work that we do as part of the annual governance statement. So we work, I think it's probably more of us working with colleagues within the council to determine the key questions that we want to ask, which will enable us to get to. This is just a small element of the contribution, but we also need to get the views from senior management in terms of their own personal views, in terms of how they are managing their services. It is important also to understand that because we're not able to audit every area within the organization, so getting some management assurances from the senior managers will help to give us some element of assurance, albeit not as limited as, not as independent as what I do, but that's purely drawn more by us rather than by management.
I think the question is, where did these 20 opinions come from?
No, it's determined just from our knowledge of the business and the governance framework, looking at all the things that we need to comply with within the council, including things that you would expect the directors and management to be aware of or to be in charge of around budget. So there are things that are probably that you will probably expect to see through our corporate assurance framework as well. So it's identified by us.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
No, they're not here.
It just appears to me to be a very wide range of areas, and I was just curious about, how do you narrow it down even to these? And is that I'm not quite sure that I understood what you said. Is this your approach, or is it an agreed approach to look at these 20 areas with management?
So I think before we do that, we go to CLB and agree what we are going to do in terms of how we are going to develop the annual governance statement. But we also need to understand that SIP have got a guidance on things that they expect us to put in the annual governance statement. So one of the key things that we have to do is to then develop something that enables us to get some awareness on how services are being managed. Because we do risk-based auditing, so there was some area that will never be audited because of the risks. So, but it is also just good to ask some of those questions. What you find is that some of those 20 areas are part of the audit plan. There are some areas on there that we have actually audited, so we still have some assurance from the audit, but there are some that will never, but would want management to confirm that they are aware and they are monitoring those things. And it gives us some element of assurance.
Okay, question from David, and then Peter.
Thank you, Chair. On page 54, on paragraph 3.1, you list 8 different areas that you think require improvement. I'd be interested to know how those 8 areas marry up to the spreadsheet on page 62 with the 22 items that are either limited or advisory grades of audit, because I would like to make sure that nothing slipped through the cracks and there's not another area that needs to be included in that. So can we have some definition of that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. So what I can say is that anything that is listed as limited assurance under Appendix A will require improvement. And that's what I say in the report. But what I've put in here, I've indicated what I'm just highlighting the areas that I think are the more focused. So what you find is that within Appendix A, risk management is reasonable. But what I'm talking about here is that I'm talking about the overall. So we're very, very good at reporting risk, But I think we are now taking additional steps to make sure that we embed risk as part of good management, as part of decision making. So what I'm reflecting on here are the core things that I think we need to look at, whereas Appendix A is very, very clear that it's all about the controls. So anything limited needs to be improved. But on this one, just following up on things that I think the focus is on.
So just to clarify, you're using your personal knowledge of the organisation to make that decision?
Yes, to make the, especially where I actually, because this is my subjective and objective report. So I use that as well to inform what we need to do here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we had a question from Peter.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, I guess I'm coming back to the point I've already made about reasonable. I'm still struggling to understand the pie chart I'm looking at now and the following in terms of what constitutes reasonable. At some stage, I would like to have something that indicates what is considered reasonable, what is considered good, and what is, if that's acceptable.
I think that's okay, Peter. Thank you. What we are talking about is that when we do an audit, each time we complete an audit review, there are 4 possible outcomes from an audit review. An audit review can conclude substantial assurance, which indicates, yeah, it's good, there are no issues, so nothing probably to worry about, it's very good. Then reasonable means that, yeah, things are working well, operating well, but there are areas that needs to be, that needs to improve or to be strengthened. And then limited assurance is that, yeah, there are some things that are working well, but largely there are things that require some significant improvement. No assurance is something is not working, so a lot needs to happen in that space. That's what we then conclude, but we are going to send you, after the meeting, we're going to send you the descriptions of the 4 categories.
Okay. That's really helpful, thank you. Yes. Don't think you've got your microphone.
Sorry,
on, Peter.
Are your committee members fully aware of and accept that reasonable constitutes reasonable?
Well, if you're able to share any guidance, I'm sure that will be welcome across the committee.
So, Chair, you'd know that when we bring to the committee, when you approve in November, when you approve the charter and the strategy, that's when we actually articulate what those things mean. So I think I think each year I come to the committee and within the strategy, we give you the descriptors. But happy to have another conversation.
Okay. Ed?
Following on from that note, and that's a great question, Peter, thank you. Can we, in future annual reports, just have the dictionary definitions of those 4 terms put in underneath? Because I appreciate they are included in other documents at other times. We also need you to appreciate we don't have our heads in this stuff every single day of the year. We have 6 meetings a year. And so just having that reminder in there is really, just on a practical level, is really, really helpful. So we understand, you know, in the same way if you had a grade criteria, understanding what an A star means relative to a B, or an A star means relative to an A, is very, is very helpful for us just as a reference point.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think we have a question from Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I've also actually got some questions around the pie chart and the statistics we've got here, though in a slightly different tactic. So I went back and had a look at last year's audit report, and that had 48% of audits being listed as compliant, which is a term which is not included in this breakdown here. I was wondering if you could just explain why we've had that change in accounting, please.
So previously, I'd included grants as part of the performance reporting, but to help me to give a clear view on controls, I've taken the grants. That's why I have given a separate paragraph on grants. So grants are no longer included within that pie chart, because I just want to focus on things that affect internal control, governance, and risk. If there is an issue with grants, I then just raise an exception report within that section.
Thank you very much. And I've noticed from the appendix that we've got three areas of substantial assurance, but the majority of it is reasonable and a good chunk of limited as well. Are you, in your own judgment, are you comfortable with us mostly being in the reasonable, limited to reasonable category instead of really pushing to get everything up into substantial?
Yes, so I think when auditors undertake work, you apply a professional judgment, isn't it, based on what you have. So I'm comfortable with the outcomes from the reviews. But I think in some cases, it's a very, very thin line between reasonable and substantial. But I'm absolutely comfortable with reasonable. That's why I'm able to provide a conclusion that I am comfortable to say, this is what I'm concluding on. But as I said before, I think that reasonable gives us the opportunity to go to the next level. So I'm sure that if everything that's being done is implemented and followed up and resourced, then probably we'll start seeing probably the number of reasonable ones. And also it takes time for some of the things that are happening to embed. So I'm hoping that some of the improvements that happened last year and this year will start to have an impact in future years. So hopefully we will start seeing probably large amounts of areas being reasonable or better.
Thank you very much for that. Just moving down to the performance regarding implemented or partially implemented management actions, we have gone down from 98% to 91%. And I appreciate we're still above the 90% target. And I know from my previous years on the committee that just being above that target at all is a really great achievement that we should definitely be proud of and celebrate. Is the relative decline from 7 percentage points a cause for concern in your view, or is it just a standard oscillation year to year?
No, I'm not absolutely concerned. I think the current arrangements, the monitoring, I think is helping us to get to where we need to get to. I think last year we overachieved, I think, because we were struggling in previous quarters. But I think you can see that last year the trajectory was possibly increasing every quarter. So yeah, I'm absolutely comfortable. Hopefully, that's why I say in the report, we just need to sustain those levels of performance.
Thank you very much. And my final question, I appreciate
Just turned your mic off.
Thank you. On the grant certifications, I read this paragraph on the grant certification, and it read to me a bit like the audit was telling us that they were feeling a bit overburdened by their duties certifying grants here. Given the value in the high tens of millions of pounds of these grants to the council, is this an area where audit feels it could benefit from more resource to help them process those grants more effectively?
No. I think I need to be a responsible chief internal audit. No, I don't think that's the point. I think what we just need to do is we need to work together with management and use technology to ensure that the process become efficient, faster, and easier. I don't think it's about giving us additional resources. We already have, I think, enough staff, and we know the environment in which we are operating, so I'm comfortable with the resources. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And just a follow-up on that, if that's all right. The work that does take place on grant certification, is that required by legislation, or is that an internal BCC requirement?
So most of the, I think in the majority of instances, the funder will specify that they require a sign-off from either myself or both the chief executive and myself. So for me and the chief executive to sign, we need to have substantial evidence that we are complying, so we need to do that work. So in some cases, if we don't do the work or if we don't comply, then there will be, I think, a risk of clawback. So we just need to make sure that we do what needs to be done to ensure we comply.
Right, thank you very much.
So I think we have another question from Ed.
I'm afraid that's provoked another follow-up. So obviously some of these grants are very, very big, 10 million plus, many a million plus, absolutely need to be certified. just going to pick out one case at random here. So we've got two active travel fund tranche 3 pieces here around Cottam Hill. One comes to just under the £450,000. The one under comes to less than 5,000. Does, this is a question for both yourself and the Chief Executive, if you're the one signing here, do the two of you need to go through the same level of rigour and same level of process for each of those grants, regardless of the value being certified, or is it a bit more proportionate to the values we're talking about?
Chair, it's more proportionate. So the smaller grants will probably take a half a day or a day. The bigger grants will take more time. So the time ranges depending on the size of the grant.
Great, thank you.
But it's important to say that the cause of that is the grant conditions. So that's not our decision. That's up to... on the point of resources, though, I actually wanted to follow up one question, which was that you've had quite a change in... We've had some change in your team since the last meeting, particularly in your deputy. So do you have the resources to complete the audit plan at the moment?
At the moment, I'm working on how I'm going to resource the plan, but I'm comfortable in terms of where we are. If there's need for me to adjust the plan in the second half of the year, I'll do that and I will inform you. But at this point in time, I'm comfortable. We are working on a plan which we will share with the audit committee when I'm done, but I'm comfortable, Chair.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, are we happy to note Simba's report? Okay, thank you. So we now move to item 17, which is the annual fraud report. I think this is Louise to...
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Louise Lee, Audit Manager with responsibility for the Counter Fraud and Investigation team. I will take the report as read, but I would like to highlight a few points with you. So we've had 4 prosecutions this year, 2 for housing fraud, 1 for council tax reduction and a former employee. And in all of these cases, we have recovered monies in the court process. So with the housing cases, for the first time, we have used an unlawful profit order, which makes the person pay any illegal gain from their activity to the council, as well as being awarded costs. In the council tax reduction case, we also were awarded costs as well as them having to repay the money. And the person who was dismissed, we have very recently finalised a proceeds of crime application that recovered the money obtained and some costs from her pension. We have developed a significant piece of work was developing our SharePoint site. And it was significant because we wanted it to be a really comprehensive resource for colleagues across the council to be able to access advice and information. And it's broken down by different service areas, by different fraud types, so it's not generic. And that's something that we will continually update, giving out new information, new fraud trends, emerging risks, and so on. One of those emerging fraud risks is something called career polygamy. I don't know if you know that term. It's a person who has more than one full-time job simultaneously. And importantly, the secondary employment is not declared. We have had instances of this at the council, and it's a national trend. At the moment, we are working on an approach which is somewhat new in that we will be looking at all of the cases that we've had, and we will be pulling together common themes, common risk indicators, and drafting what I in my head refer to as a collective report to really understand where our risks are and where we can prevent and detect this when it happens. And that's an approach that's already worked with some direct payment. I think there are also known as personal budget cases. We had quite a few of those referred to us this year. And again, we pulled together all the common themes, which made the report much more impactful. And following the report, we've had really good engagement with the service. We've been collaborating with them to revise their policies and procedures. So that's an approach I think that's worked really well to help the organisation learn.
Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
So thank you very much, Louise. I must say personally, the term career polygamy is not a term I like.
Nor do I.
I would prefer the term unauthorised secondary employment. But it's really interesting to know that that pattern is increasing. So thank you for drawing that to our attention. Do we have any questions? First, Jonathan. Then I think Fabian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Louise, for the report. There's obviously a lot of good work going on in this area. Whenever we receive a report from the counter-fraud team, it is clearly evident that the work that you do is very valuable. I'd just like to talk about Appendix 2, which is the whistleblowing cases closed between 1st of October 2025 and 31st of March 2026. So there's 6 cases here. There were 6 allegations. The report states that 2 of them were not substantiated. Does that mean that we can assume that the other 4 were substantiated? There's outcomes listed, but I'm not sure if those outcomes are entirely clear on whether or not the allegations were substantiated. If we take the one about data protection breaches, it looks like the allegation was substantiated because it says the process had been improved in the light of the concerns raised by the whistleblower. If we look at the one below that, it says all the concerns raised would be investigated through the grievance procedure, but that statement doesn't indicate what the outcome of the allegation was, and so it's surprising to see that it's actually listed as closed, a closed case in the report. So I wondered if we could have some clarity on whether or not the 4 cases listed where it doesn't say allegation not substantiated means that the allegation was substantiated.
I accept, and we can certainly have a look and see how we report that. The whistleblowing cases are usually extremely complex for a variety of reasons. I think someone's going to come in.
So there are 2 things with whistleblowing. The first one is that at times people have got a grievance, and then they also come with the whistleblowing. So what we have to avoid is running 2 parallel processes. So we always, if someone raises something that is very personal to the individual, which is absolutely personal interest, then we recommend and advise the whistleblower to go through the grievance process. But if within that grievance or what they've told us, there's a big public interest, then we'll look at that small element. But what we find with all these things with which we have listed, I think the majority of the things that have been said in there would not have been substantiated, but there would have been some elements of improvement that have been identified, which is say, can we look at this, can we improve on this? But the majority of the cases, especially that we get, is very, very, very difficult to prove the allegations because of the lack of information. Some of the allegations are anonymous, and some of the challenges again are that colleagues raise issues around whistleblowing, but in actual fact, they've raised the same matter as a grievance. Yeah, that's why it is reported this way. What we are trying to do is to give you at least something that we are looking into these things, rather than for me to simply say we have closed 15, but you don't have something to see. But that's the reason why we report it this way. But I'm comfortable with what has been reported, and we also refer the matter to the relevant colleagues as well.
Thank you. So you're comfortable with how it's been reported, and it's rather more nuanced to say that the allegation is either substantiated or it's not substantiated. It's not as binary as that.
Yes, it's very, very, it's very difficult. So the right position is where we don't have evidence, we'll simply say not substantiated because there's no evidence. But where there is a bit of something that we've picked up from, the key issue is that for whistleblowing to be to add value is for the whistleblowers raising issues. Even if we don't substantiate the majority of the things, anything that can benefit from that, then we deal with it. But I get the point. I get the point that in some cases, I think probably start by saying not substantiated, however, or yeah. But that's point taken.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we had a question from Fabian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a few. On page 72, I've got a couple of general questions, but this one's quite specific. Section 3.6 about bespoke fraud awareness. You name a number of teams that are getting fraud awareness training. I'm just thinking, shouldn't fraud awareness training be mandatory for all council staff, because it could happen anywhere? Even if you have to have bespoke training for particular issues that could come up, surely every staff member should have annual fraud awareness training.
So there is a mandatory fraud e-learning package that everybody is required to do. That has just been updated and refreshed. It was completed every 3 years, and it's now going to be completed every 2 years. So this bespoke training is on top of that.
I mean, I work in the civil service, we have to do it every year. I think that wouldn't, there's nothing, I think if it's an e-learning package that you do in your own time, I think making it required training every year would be a good way of embedding what's needed, just in case somebody notices something or doesn't.
I suspect if you asked the fraud team, they'd probably agree with you. But
yes,
there's probably a wider question on how often that is required.
I think the 2 years would be appropriate, given that we also send some reminders during the year. So in November, we send reminders around the fraud week. The reason why I'm saying the 2 years is appropriate is that there are a number of mandatory training that people have to do during the year. So it's important that we get that balance right. But what is important is that if there's anything that is new, then we communicate through internal communication and that. But I think the 2 years should be sufficient. The Chief Executive wants to come in. Yeah.
Well, it was only, sorry, Nick Hibbard, Chief Exec. It was only just to remind the committee that there's a whole range of mandatory training, so there is a need to look at how we sequence that training. If you require all staff, and remember we've got thousands of them, to do mandatory training every year across all of the areas where it's important to train, you get into a situation where the quality of how that training is received and undertaken starts to dip. So I would prefer that we get that we do the training as frequently as we need to, but we get the quality right, and that we get that mandatory training right. I'd also refer back to the previous report where, under the management assurances, it was identified that mandatory training is an area we need to focus on. So my first preference would be, let's get our mandatory training done, and then we can look at whether the frequency can be increased.
So also maybe a question of reviewing the mandatory training, which ones need to be done more regularly than others, and then maybe, if need be, shifting some of them around.
That piece of work is underway, yes.
I do have a couple of other questions, if I may. On unauthorised secondary employment, what sort of levels of employment is this? Because I was just wondering whether poverty or cost of living is a factor. I'm not condoning it. I'm just wondering whether is it happening with people at the lower end of the pay scales, or is it, regardless of pay scale, people doing it anywhere in the government?
From what we've seen in Bristol, it tends to be the higher end of pay scale. So I don't believe that to be a factor from what we've seen locally.
No, just to qualify, I don't think it's the high end. So if we say high end, I think probably the mid managers, because high end, I think people may construe to mean probably what this is not. So we are talking about operational managers, and yeah, not another higher level than that.
The final point I wanted to raise is about sort of the issue of potential contract fraud. I mean, there have been a lot of cases where contract work is substandard. There's been issues in my ward where works have been done and people have to be brought back to redo it. That takes ages. So there's people, and I'm just wondering what's being done to check the quality of work. If we get a contractor out to do a bit of work, whether it's road repairs or anything like that, what's being done to check the quality before we pay? I mean, just down the road here, there's been some resurfacing done over the roadworks just outside City Hall, just down past College Green. And I'm not suggesting there's anything deliberate done wrong, but if they were substandard and having to be redone in 6 months, within 6 months, the work which is being done, what's going on, and how are we making sure that the work is done of a sufficient standard in the first place, so it doesn't have to be redone and we don't end up having to spend time and money chasing it, getting it redone.
Fabian, I think the question is there a relationship between fraud investigations and contract management? Is that part of the fraud investigation programme?
Not specifically contract management, although when we do work with services, well, either investigation or we're now doing fraud risk assessment workshops, that would be part of that piece of work. So it's not something that we directly deal with, but we include it where it's relevant. Yeah, I know contract management is something we have.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think the place to pick that up is that contract management is on our audit plan. So I think that would be where we would pick that up further. Any other questions before we move on? I think it's a question from Joe and then...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a general question first, if I may, and this may be you reminding us really of something you've already told us, but it is brief. I just wanted to know a little bit more about, when you talk about the fraud team and the people in the council who are working in this area and working to improve the situation. Is it entirely within internal audit, or do you draw on other resources across the council and different departments where there may be people who are focusing on this and have even skills or qualifications in fraud management? That's my first question. Then I have two very specific ones, please.
You can, yes.
So, fraud prevention is everyone's responsibility. Yeah, so everyone is responsible for preventing fraud. So that's why we have to do fraud e-learning and all that. And then we also have management have also responsibility for ensuring that they have sufficient controls to manage and detect fraud. But the role of the fraud team, we play two roles. The first is to do the counter-fraud work, the work that we need to do to make sure that the council has got sufficient arrangements for preventing fraud from happening. So we take the thought leadership role of providing the strategy, the policy, and guidance, and working with our colleagues across the council in terms of supporting them in doing fraud risk assessments and engaging them directly. But then there's this other part that we do in terms of investigating if there's any suspected case of fraud. So we play two roles: the counter fraud, which is the proactive work, and then the reactive work that has to do with investigations. But at the moment, we are focusing on preventing. If we prevent fraud, it means that we don't spend more time investigating. So the focus is prevent. And then if something crosses the net, then we've got a robust investigation team that can help us to investigate and recover any losses. If you want the numbers, if you want the numbers, I think we can provide you with the structure if you want.
No, it's not quite that simple. I was simply asking, you know, is this entirely within, when you talk about the investigative work, for example, is that work entirely within the internal audit team? It is, yes?
Yes, so
Okay.
in investigations, it's predominantly us.
Okay.
But there are instances where we work with management in terms of investigating a particular case.
Yeah.
But investigations is within the team.
Okay,
But
thank you.
we collaborate with everybody else if needs be.
Okay. Thank you very much. My two specific questions, Chair, if I may. On page, 4.1, you set out there the referrals that have been received. I wondered is there any trend information with this? Have we got last year's, for example? And I know you may tell me, well, you had that last year, but do you know, has there been much change in the trend here?
They are broadly similar, but actually I think for the half-year report, when I come back to you, we will be doing some analysis of referrals and fraud types. So I plan to do a piece of work.
Okay.
But they are broadly comparable.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. And then page 75, where you show us some income and costs financials. Oops, sorry, I've lost it now myself. There's an item there that I just wanted clarification on, please. It's and you do have a note on it, but I'm still confused. It's the new homes bonus line.
Yeah.
So you have the recoverable payments of 291,000. And then in the last column, 367,000 almost of costs. Can you explain that line, please?
So the 291,000 is the amount of money from amendments to council tax accounts. So throughout the work, we would remove, for example, a single person's discount or a second home premium might be added on. So that's the total of increased revenue to be paid through recoverable through the council tax. The 366,000 is income. So the council tax team do a report on the number of homes that were empty and now are not. So we brought them back into use, and that attracts a government grant. So that 366,000 is, think of that as income rather than costs. Does that help?
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So should that be in brackets, maybe?
Sorry?
Should that be in brackets, given the...
So I think the heading I've got costs, ad pen, unlawful profit order and income, but it may not be clear enough.
It's in, the point is it's income, I guess, and
yes.
That's what's okay,
indeed,
the important thing. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, and I think we had a question from James.
Thank you, Chair. I just had maybe one or two questions relating to the career polygamy, so I'll throw them all at you at once.
Okay.
So partly these people who have been dismissed, I'm assuming that they were kind of appointed and contracted on, and then it was identified quite quickly that they had a second role, or was this something that was identified after a longer period of time? The reason why I ask is that obviously when you appoint someone new, you get a new tax code generated and provided by HMRC. So I was just wondering if basically if there's any way of flagging when there's potentially a tax code which would deviate from the standard. I want to say it's 1250 or whatever it is, and whether that's a kind of a red flag that might be good at early intervention. And then you also noted in your priorities on page 76 that strengthening your ability to prevent and detect career polygamy is one of your priorities. You noted, it was noted that some of the dismissals had, those dismissed had jobs in other local authorities. I was just wondering about collaboration with other local authorities and also with kind of Westminster departments, and whether that is a priority that's being driven locally, or whether that's something that could benefit from having potentially a national focus and a national level of collaboration, especially if it's becoming an increasing issue.
Okay, so the first question about how quickly it's picked up, some of them have been picked up quite quickly. and some of them have not. Some of them where somebody's been with us for 9 months or so before it's been picked up. So it's a real mixture of how quickly it's identified. We have looked at doing something with tax codes. It's not as straightforward as I thought it might be in my head. So it's still on the plan to do, and we are hearing from other local authorities that they have done some work on that. So we've got some good ideas from them about how we can revisit that as a possible exercise. So we are also discussing with other local authorities about using data and how we can use that to identify this. Some of, probably about 50% of the employees have been agency, which makes it slightly more difficult how the data can be used. There is a national, national campaign, if you call it that. The Cabinet Office, who do the 2-yearly National Fraud Initiative data matching exercise. So that already includes payroll data from other local authorities, which does pick it up, but obviously every 2 years is not often enough. But they are working with HMRC to provide a solution that would help with that. So it's a case of talking to other local authorities and the Cabinet Office and maybe trialling new approaches to see what we can do to identify it and prevent it.
Okay, thank you. Question from Ed.
Thank you very much. So I think staying on that theme, it is obviously concerning to hear that there's at least one case where it's been 9 months where we've had a case of clear polygamy. I think it's worth noting that as councillors, lots of us have got second jobs as well. That's quite a different situation. It's consenting, maybe you call it, career polyamory perhaps. But yeah, there we go. I'll practice my stand-up set here in audit. I didn't think that would be happening. But seriously, on the note of career polygamy in this case, I'm just a bit concerned, given the length of time in that case, and thankfully we're not aware of other cases where that length of time is that significant, so perhaps others are being caught early, which is a good sign. Does this raise any wider questions around the efficacy of some of the line management taking place within your authority? Is this a potential indication that some line reports aren't being overseen effectively? I don't expect this might be something you can comment on in detail, but I don't know if there's any views on that in the room.
I think that's why we're pulling together, looking at every single case we've looked at to identify those common factors. Are there sufficient targets, performance management, or gaps in the conflict of interest declaration and so on, so where we can try and close some of those gaps. And we'll continue to do that with any other cases that come to our attention.
That's great, thank you. And then just separately, going back to page 71 and the discussion to do with direct payments, you said that examples of the themes and common risks relating to the fraudulent use of direct payments have been shared with senior management. Would we be able to see a list of those examples of themes and common risks?
I would imagine we could do a redacted version. I'm just trying to think what information was in that.
I mean, I think the purpose of this report is to identify what those patterns are and to share where they come from. I'm not sure what more information we'd want to share more widely.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I've popped the request out there anyway, and we'll see what happens with it.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just thought it might be helpful for this is the report that was considered by the Internal Audit and Risk Board, which is the board that I chair, that SIMBA supports. So we looked at this report, and we looked at the themes that are coming out of this report.
Yeah, that's fine, and it says in there that some of the themes have been shared with you and other members of senior management, assumably either as part of that or on a separate occasion. So the request is, if it is possible, to share just the list of the themes and the common risks to provide a bit more context to members.
I'm not sure there's a separate document though, but we can check. So I think it was more discussion around the themes. So by sharing this report, we were sharing the themes, but I think we can definitely check that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think that's the end of this discussion. Thank you, Louise, for a very comprehensive report and discussion. and presume we're happy to note the report. Thank you. So we move now to item 18, which is the annual governance statement. So this report is for our approval, so we have to make a decision whether to accept it or not at the end of the discussion. It's being presented by Nick.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, thank you to say it's great to be at Audit Committee this afternoon. And I'm delighted that Audit Committee is now being webcast and recorded. I'm not able to attend every committee that happens in the Council, but I do actually watch those that are webcast usually after the event. So I look forward to following future audit committees when I'm not in attendance. So, Chair, this report comes under the requirement under the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015, which requires the Council to conduct an annual review of its system of internal control and publish an annual governance statement with the annual statement of accounts. The process is a key mechanism for ensuring that the Council has an effective system of internal control and governance, and that any shortfalls are identified and addressed. In terms of today's report, the annual governance statement before you confirms that the Council's governance arrangements remain effective in 25-26. This conclusion is based on a comprehensive evidence base which includes internal audits, external audit, statutory officer assurances and external inspection. We are seeing some clear progress alongside a range of continued improvement activity, and that is reflecting some maturity in our internal governance arrangements. In terms of some of that progress, the governance model in terms of the committee system is now well embedded. You'll know that in 2025, members were involved in reviewing the committee system after 1 year of it being in operation, and then earlier this year, the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge found that our governance arrangements are robust and increasingly mature, so that was positive to get that feedback. In terms of our corporate assurance and risk management, we've introduced last year a new internal corporate assurance framework which looks at how we manage assurance across a whole range. That included introducing the new Officer Audit and Risk Board, which I chair, and that has ensured that we improve the way we look at performance, health and safety, audit, risk, and other areas, budget management. The enterprise risk management policy has been refreshed with improved alignment to audit and assurance functions, and we now have the more structured 3 lines of defence model in operation. In terms of external validation of services and governance, external audit gave an unmodified opinion on the accounts, as you've heard, and confirmed adequate arrangements, albeit with some areas to improve. We had some positive findings in relation to Ofsted-focused visits of our children's services, including positive feedback on our leadership and workforce culture. And you'll be aware that the Care Quality Commission rated adult social care as good last year. In terms of our organisational capacity and leadership stability, we have seen the capacity in senior leadership strengthened, including permanent appointments across key roles. When I came into post in January 2025, many of the senior roles were either in acting or interim positions. We've created a new housing directorate, which has allowed for enhanced leadership focus on housing improvement. And we've seen agency spend reduced by 39%, which reflects improved workforce stability. There are also workforce leadership development programs now in place under the new workforce strategy. We've also introduced strengthening of our finance and performance governance, and that has seen delivery of the budget, the MTFS and accounts to the deadlines, and introduction of a new budget assurance framework and a budget assurance board, which looks at working with officers to ensure that budget holders are giving us assurance of their budget management each month where there is need to give check and challenge. We've introduced a new corporate performance framework that was approved by Strategy and Resources Committee at the end of last year. And we have dashboards which are then delivered to each policy committee to improve transparency and oversight of our performance. You'll be aware that our Managing Our Debt programme has been delivering results with accounts receivable debts reducing, and accounts in receivable in-year collection improving. In terms of areas for improvement, there are some areas where we need to remain focused on our financial sustainability, particularly on DSG and savings delivery. Although we have seen significant improvement in savings delivery over the past 2 years, but the ongoing pressure upon this DSG deficit and significant savings requirements require our attention and focus. And in particular, we're very focused on responding to the government's SEND reforms, and will be shortly submitting our local SEND reform plan to government following consideration at next month's Strategy and Resources Committee. Second area of focus is around housing services and regulatory compliance, following the C3 regulatory judgment, which was requiring improvement in our social housing standards. So the delivery of the Housing Consumer Standards Improvement Programme remains a key focus area for us. On data quality, information and governance, you would have discussed at this committee before around the previous enforcement notice around FOIs and then SAR backlogs. We remain on track in terms of meeting the SAR notice, the ICO notice in relation to SARs, which is positive. And we are seeing an improved maturity in terms of how we're responding to those SAR requests. So overall, I think the statement presents a positive balanced position. Our governance arrangements are effective, and they have been improving, and it's been something which I've been giving personal focus to since coming into post. I do think there is evidence of progress, and I can recommend this report to you as a fair reflection of the Council's internal control and governance arrangements for 25-26. Simba is obviously here to ably help me with responding to any questions. Thank you.
So thank you for that presentation, Nick. Do we have questions on the report, starting with Nick?
Thank you, Chief Executive. I would agree with you that our governance is indeed improving year on year, and a lot in here is very positive. I'd just say at the very end of the report, page 101, 102, there is a little irony that perhaps we haven't been as transparent about our transparency as we might be. I noticed that the ICO enforcement notices are given as little text as possible, without mentioning the scale of the backlog or what we're doing to deal with it. And also we have not mentioned in our self-appraisal the fact that we actually challenged the Information Commissioner in court and lost, which I think is quite relevant to our governance process over the year.
So I wouldn't say that we've given as little information as possible. We have highlighted that the Information Commissioner enforcement notice that was received is an issue, that there are improvement plans in place for both FOIs and SARs, and I can report that we are on track with meeting those improvement programs. So we have regular updates at both the Corporate Leadership Board, but also we hold regular updates with the Information Commissioner, and we're confident that we'll be seeing the SARS enforcement notice lifted in time with meeting those deadlines.
Okay, so a question from Ed.
Thank you very much. To echo what Nick said, I'm pleased to see the improvements in the governance arrangements, particularly around the Housing Directorate. But I'm going to touch again on the SAR enforcement notice question. So back in our last audit committee back in March, we did go through this in detail. So I will say in fairness that we have had sight of that as an audit committee. It's just maybe not as transparent in this particular document. And you mentioned there that the enforcement notice has not yet been lifted, but that we would comply with it. Now, the key deadlines in here were all ahead of today. They were all in April of this year in terms of the complete clearing of the backlog. And I think there are only 14 cases to go as of the end of March. So could I get confirmation that we have complied with the clearance of those 14 cases, and that all we're waiting on now is the ICO to come back and say, yes, you have complied?
I don't know if there's anyone in the room that knows that. It's an important question.
Yeah.
Unless you're able to answer.
No, Chair, it is an important question, and I was anticipating you might ask that question. Our service manager that's responsible for liaising with the ICO on this is on leave this week. It's half term this week, so I haven't got the latest information. What I would say is if there was any concern of us being off track in terms of clearing those final cases in relation to the notice, we would have heard about it. I haven't heard anything, and in this case, I can assume that we're on track.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I would say to that is that being on track would mean that we would have cleared them 4 weeks ago. So I just wanted to be clear. If we have not cleared them 4 weeks ago, then we're by definition not on track. I realise we might be in semantics here, given it is a small amount of cases.
I'd endorse the position you're making. The text says the council is on track to comply by April 26. It's now May 26, and so there's a tense problem in the report in any case.
Yeah, so my request would then be, could it just be confirmed ahead of the next full council, please?
We can absolutely confirm that. We probably can do so next week, as soon as the relevant manager is back. I take the point about the April 26 date in the report. It reflects the fact that this report is drafted through a decision-making pathway. That means it was drafted during April.
No, thank you, Nick. But it would be good to have that confirmation if that's available. So, question from Jonathan, and then Patrick, and then some other people.
Thank you, Nick, for the report. Yeah, I've got a comment and a question, basically. The comment is that the report states that the Chief Internal Auditor gives an opinion on the effectiveness of governance, risk management and internal control arrangements. But as far as I can see, it doesn't actually state what that opinion is. I mean, we know that the Chief Internal Auditor has given reasonable assurance, and the annual governance statement does state that certain areas have been given reasonable assurance, but unless I'm mistaken, I don't see that the overall assessment is shown in the report, which I would have thought was quite important. And I would have thought that some detail behind it might be useful. So, for example, we know from the Chief Internal Auditor's annual report that 1 in 5 of internal audits that were carried out or concluded on received only limited assurance, but you wouldn't know that from reading this report, and I think that that's quite a sort of material factor. But onto a specific question. Under income collection and debt management, you said that it's an improving position with regard to accounts receivable. And the report states that the average debtor days is 55 days. So that would be for 25-26. It said it was 77 days in 24-25. Well, obviously we haven't yet received the debt management report for 25-26, so we can't verify that figure of 55 days. But in terms of the figure of 77 days for 24-25, well, we received the debt management report for 24-25 at the October audit committee, and I calculated that figure to be 138 days. It's not actually shown in the report itself. I think it should be, but average debtor days or debtor days outstanding, whichever terminology you wish to use, I think should be included in the debt management report, and I've highlighted that previously. But I would like to see the methodology of how that figure of 55 days is calculated, because it's significantly different to the figure that I calculated. And I'm not, in terms of accounts receivable, I'm not actually seeing an improving trend in this area when I analyse the debt management reports. So I would just like to see the methodology for calculating that.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's an important question. If we're not, I mean, are you able to comment on that now, or would we be able to share that information?
No, I was just going to comment on the first point by Councillor Haga around the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion. Is there under Principle G? So under Principle G, we state the opinion. But because the opinion is good, then we don't go into detail to explain other things. But if it was limited assurance, then you have to put to justify what that is. But for the purpose of this, the reasonable assurance opinion is sufficient without any qualification. But limited assurance, obviously, and you know that you have to play. Yeah, that's the main reason why it's the way it is.
Yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying, yeah.
Okay, I think the next question was from Patrick.
Thank you, Jet, and thank you, Nick, for the presentation. I think I would be remiss as the Finance Subcommittee Chair if I didn't just say how pleased I think we all are with the savings delivery and the changes we've made to make the budget process more secure and sorry, the heat's getting to me today. I think the improvements to the budget process overall and the financial progress we've made on our savings targets is brilliant, and it's something we really need to celebrate. Of course, not taking our foot off the pedal in that regard, but I think 93% of savings delivery puts us nearly a year ahead of the targets there, and that's credit to the officers and management who've done an excellent job in delivering those targets. I am, and I've raised this before in other forums, but I am a bit concerned about the section on the income collection and debt management around how our tax base as a council is now our income base is much more reliant upon local taxation as council tax and business rates. Does internal audit have an opinion about what that might indicate for the future financial sustainability of the council in the longer term? Okay. All right, well, thanks very much for that then.
For the record, no.
Makes sense. And I'm going to just jump back then on a different item to the FOI and SAR issue. I appreciate I'm only substituting on the committee. I've missed the previous discussions around this. Could we just get an idea of what has and what is being done to address those issues, please? Because right now we've got it says that we've got the action plans in place. On track.
There was a substantial report at the,
okay.
at the last committee
I will look that report up then.
And in future meetings, you'll be able to go back to future recordings of meetings to enjoy that. That isn't possible last year, but that report is available.
Thank you very much.
I think we have a question from Joe, and then from Ed.
Thank you very much. I think there's a small, well, unless I'm misunderstanding, please bear with us, it's very hot in here. 3.2, I think we mean to say 25/6, 2024, 2025, 26 in 3.2 in the second line. It's just a little typo, perhaps. That can be just double checked. Fair reflection of the internal control and governance environment during 24-25. We're talking about 25-26, aren't we, is my point. Just hope you agree with that, that needs to be changed.
Chair, that looks like a typo, yes.
Okay.
Okay. And then I have, I do have a question, it's kind of almost a general one. Internal audit reviews are mentioned quite a bit here. And great, you know, that they have been carried out, and the public, of course, will be reassured that our internal audit function is being applied for the benefit of our overall governance, and that's terrific. What I think would help here, though, there are a lot of them, a lot of internal audit reviews referenced. Could we have, I mean, I'm assuming these are internal audit reviews undertaken during 25-26, yes. Could we just have, I don't know, the month of the issue of those reports, just so that we and the public eventually can, if they want to look in any more depth, that they can do that if they're interested. I think that would help with just the sheer facts of the document. That's all I have to say, really. Thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive and clear, I think, statement, annual governance statement. One little point, Chair, I'm presuming, though, it is draft, and it gets signed off with the 25-26 audited accounts, yes? So between now and then, Some of the things we've mentioned, I mean, I'm assuming they'll be changed or, you know, refined. But between now and then, we won't have this back, will we? This is us approving it, is that correct? For
we are being asked to
publication.
approve this report today, subject to, if there's typos, we'll correct them, but we're approving this report today.
Okay, okay. And
so
sorry.
it's accurate, it has to be accurate as of that point.
Yes.
Things will change over the next 3 months.
So this statement will need to be as up-to-date as is possible at the time of signing. So what we are doing today is we are approving this so that it can go to the external auditors as part of the statement of accounts. If there's anything that we need to amend or change, then when you consider the accounts, then you have again another opportunity. But for today, it's the start of the process. This is going to be audited by the external auditors. They will probably raise certain things that they might want us to review, but this is your principal time to approve so that it goes to the external auditors.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so a question from Ed and then Nick.
Okay, thank you. So just two little things, particularly considering that it's something in draft state and it will go through final approvals later. So you won't be surprised to hear that there's another diagram I'm not best pleased with on page 88, but I appreciate this one was not one of our own creation. Firstly, it does need some alt text. Secondly, the colour contrast needs to improve. But thirdly, it would just be helpful to understand the significance of the arrows because it's not entirely obvious. But I won't dwell on that any further. I wanted to ask on page 97, there's a sentence in there around focuses for future improvement under Principle F. It says, improving bank reconciliation processes to ensure early resolution of aged reconciling items. Now, I don't know if we can clarify this because on first reading that looks like an oxymoron. I don't understand how an aged item can be resolved early. So if we could clarify that, please.
So the audit committee will remember that last time you received an exception report on bank reconciliations in which you discussed and colleagues were here and the confirmation was that they were going. The main problem is there was it was taking time to clear outstanding items. So that was the main issue with that. There was a long list of a huge number of transactions that were outstanding. That was the problem. Now what this is saying is actually addressing that problem.
Yeah, so I understand that principle of it, but the item is now aged, so it hasn't been cleared early. So that's why it's aged. So it's more around the language. There's maybe just a request for slightly plainer language around it because it reads as an oxymoron. Yeah, I understand the principle.
Yeah, but that's fine. I think we are. Yeah,
I think there will always be aged items on the bank account that need reconciliation. The issue is there were too many of them and we weren't doing it quickly enough. But I think that issue has been. I believe that issue has been now been addressed. Yeah, thank you. We're getting towards the end of the time, but I believe there's a question from David.
Thank you, Chair, and I can't understate how pleased I personally am about the change in the way that this council is governed. I think it's a massive improvement in terms of the committee system and the way we've been working in the past. So, having said that, on page 93, we talk about areas of focus, future improvement, about compliance, and we specifically talk about establishing a systematic process for identifying and assessing longer-term severe weather risks or preparing long-term mitigations. I think that also needs to add some statements about whether we're meeting our climate change targets and whether we are complying with those targets, because they are the things that are leading to those severe weather events. So I'd like to see some mention of that, please. Is that agreeable?
Comment on that, Nick?
I mean, I think we do recognise that severe weather is a implication of climate change. I think when it comes to looking at both how we manage risk and wider climate change policies, the Environment Committee is very focused on ensuring that we do have robust practices in place in terms of the transition to net zero and to both mitigating the impact of climate change as well as changing it. So I think you could put it in here, but I wouldn't want the omission of it being here to have any suggestion that we're not focused on that. The other thing to say, Chair, of course, that ensuring that we're accelerating our work in relation to the transition to net zero and tackling both the climate and biodiversity emergency is a key objective within our corporate strategy, which was revised during this financial year that this report covers.
Okay. Okay, thank you. There are no...
So I've got some more things.
One more question? Okay.
One more question. On page 102, paragraph 5.3, we list 4 things that we have improved oversight and reasonable assurance opinions on. And one of those is adult social care payments, CONTROC. And if we go back to the spreadsheet on page 62, that has a limited assurance rating. So I'm surprised it's on the list of things that have improved. Can we have some clarification on that, please?
So you remember that when you received the CONTROC audit, you remember, I think 6 months ago, and there was a lot of conversation and work, and there's been a lot of discussions at the Audit and Risk Board around this, and I have been involved with conversations with the relevant director. So I think they have done a lot of work. But why it's on that list is because the work was done, it was finalized, I think, late April last year. That's why it's on the list. So, but time has gone, so I think things have moved on, and I'm comfortable with that. There's going to be a follow-up review, actually. So I'm happy to share the outcomes with you, but I'm comfortable with the progress there.
I do think we need to see those outcomes before we sign it off on the annual governance statement, because that's saying that we have agreed that it's happened.
I mean, the annual governance statement is not exactly a summary of audits and items that have come to the audit committee. It's a summary from primarily from the management side about the position at that point in time. So if progress has happened since an audit, that's important to recognise. But the substantive point is we need to see the position on that audit is really important, because we had a very detailed discussion of that position, and we were expecting to see progress, so we definitely will. I think you had a question, Nick.
Yes, expanding on what Joe has asked, and it's a question to, I suppose, the chair at the top table. What are we doing with this report? So it's not written by us. It is expressly going to be signed by not the audit committee and not any of the auditors. But we are asked to consider and agree. Now, I think we've done a lot of considering, but most of this committee have come up with ways in which the report could be improved by suggesting extra areas of focus. I haven't heard that those have been accepted apart from a single typo. So if it's a binary vote of, are you happy with this report, and all of us have said, well, we think it can be improved this way, we should vote it down. Is that right?
I suppose it depends how strongly you feel that, Nick. If you think substantively it does its job and you've made some helpful comments around it, I would not vote it down.
Are they helpful comments if they don't go anywhere apart from the minutes of this meeting?
I mean, firstly, it's just important to reassure the committee that we are listening and to your comments. The typo is on the cover report, not on the annual governance statement report, so I just think it's worth pointing that out. And where it seems that we do so, I don't see any reason why we can't reflect your comments in the final version that will go with the final statements of accounts as the Chief Internal Auditor has reflected. So we are listening, we are reflecting on that. The role today is for you to agree that it's a fair reflection of our internal governance environment. But in making it a fair reflection, we can also reflect on the comments that you're making today.
Okay. Final question, Joe, before we...
It's not really a question, Chair. It's a suggestion, hopefully. I mean, what we need to be doing is agreeing it, subject to the comments that we've made and the changes that we've asked to be reflected. We can do that, can't we?
Yeah, that makes sense. You'd be happy for us to do. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes, sorry. Before we do that, I actually have a question on section 5.1, or actually 5.2, the section on key governance issues, which are important for us all to be to understand the issues that are being identified there. So the first one of those on the DSG. I think the description of the DSG reform is not massively clear, because you could read that sentence on the 100 million, the 90%. You could read that as believing that our debt had been reduced by the end of March, which is not what that means. So I think it is the phrasing of that could be slightly clearer, because I think what that says is the debt at that point is that amount, and that debt will be reduced. But it will be reduced at the point at which the DSG reform principles are put into place, which is probably by the end of the next financial year, but not by that year. So I think, and also the remaining 10% is still an issue which we have to absorb. So I wonder if the phraseology there could be clarified slightly.
Yes, well spotted. I think we do need to get that correct. The reforms are welcome. They do help in terms of the opportunity for some of our deficit to be cleared, but it is up to 90%. It's not, doesn't cover the final 10%, so we still need to remain focused on that. And it is subject to the DFE accepting our local SEND reform plan, which we'll be submitting on the 17th of June.
Okay, so thank you, Nick. Thank you for the report and the way you've responded to the discussion. So I think what we're doing is we are approving this report subject to the improvements and clarifications that we've asked for, and that this report will be finalised by yourself, the leader, the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer in due course before the audit is undertaken. Not exactly.
No, just a clarification. Sorry, Nancy Rollison, Head of Legal Services. It would be really helpful if we could just summarise the subjects that you have identified for improvement, just so that we're absolutely clear, because they've been sort of coming up here and there, and I'm not sure if Jeremy's captured all of them, so that I think that would be helpful if we could just summarise them.
That's a slightly dangerous question.
This meeting is webcast, so I will go through and pick up everything. I mean, I have made a note of where there are comments, suggestions and actions required, but I will also be, in addition to that, going through the webcast and picking everything up as well, just to say, if it wasn't webcast, that's something that might be a helpful thing to do. But yeah.
Nancy, you're happy for us to progress on that basis. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's the motion before us. Everyone in favour of that, say aye. Brilliant. I think that's unanimous.
Was that unanimous?
I think it was unanimous. Can I just check? Anyone wanting to vote no?
I hadn't.
I was looking.
Yeah.
Could I suggest that we repeat the vote then, if it's not been recorded?
Yeah. Sorry. So it's moved by the chair, seconded by Councillor Coombs, to approve it with the additional comments and improvements, and then, given to officers to act as per the recommendations. Yes. So all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is there one abstention there?
No. So hang on.
Yeah, maybe we can't.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, they don't.
Okay, that's fine. Is anyone wanting to vote no? And is anyone wanting to abstain?
Yeah.
Okay. Unanimous by voting no.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Nick. So we now move to our last item,
Chair,
item 9.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I appreciate we've only got one more item left. Would it be all right if we had a quick water break at breather at this point?
I've got things pressure on tonight. I'd like it if we just get this done because I was able to deal with something with our water tonight. It looks like that's been timed out.
So, hang on. Some of us would like to have a break. Can I just have an indication how many of us would like to have a short break?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of access, but it's this heat.
So, unfortunately, I think we need to agree with that. If anyone would like to leave, if they're not able to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're more than able to. Please do that. So let's have a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 16:40. I think at one meeting, Aldo, we should definitely put you first. You definitely have the short straw here. But thank you to everyone. Councillor Breckle has had to leave, but we are still super quorate. So our last item is your report on the corporate risks.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Aldo Zanetti, Corporate Risk Manager. This is the regular quarterly risk update. So there's 14 current corporate risks. We've got 2 that are scoring critical at 28. That's corporate risk 60 and corporate risk 58. Corporate risk 60 has been at that level for 8 consecutive periods, and corporate risk 58 for 3 consecutive periods. One of the corporate risks improved during the period. That's corporate risk 12. And that's predominantly down to a lot of the good work by the business continuity team in collating plans at both the corporate and directorate level. We've got one deteriorating risk, which is corporate risk 61, and the risk exposure has increased on that one due to a contractor incident, and it's been one of 3 such incidents in recent months. Some highlights during the period. As previously mentioned, the new enterprise risk management policy was approved, and we're now in the process of rolling that out and embedding elements of that during this year. Working with our learning and development team, we've launched a new online risk management course. And so far, it's been positive feedback from colleagues that have sat that course. It's also being targeted at the leadership development programme. And we will be looking to make that a mandatory course as part of mandatory training going forward as well. During the period, we also held several knowledge sharing sessions with specific directorates and also one with members. And they've proven to be useful in the sense of baselining risk understanding, risk management processes, and ultimately how it's applied across Bristol. I think something for information, we held a risk workshop with the CLB last month, and the output of that will be shared at the next meeting in terms of be part of the quarterly update. But the purpose of that workshop was to refresh and calibrate the corporate risk register for Q1, as well as informing a new risk appetite statement as well. Like I said, the outputs of those will be shared at the next audit committee meeting. So that's the update. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. First question from Nick.
Thank you. So to look at the deteriorating risk, CRR 61, so as you highlighted, there have been 3 high potential incidents in recent months, so that's 3 occasions in which someone working for us could have died. And quite reasonably, the likelihood has thus increased. Now, CDM is a legal matter, and I know that our head of legal services has been patiently here for 2.5 hours and has vanished now, but it's also falls under the chief executive. I wonder if the head of strategic finance can offer a management response on construction matters. With a risk like this, and specifically this one, can you tell me a little bit about who is managing that risk? Which of the council committees it's coming to, what are we doing in terms of mitigations? I would have hoped to have seen that risk in particular included as an appendix to show us the whole sheet of what the issues are and what the mitigations are. But in terms of assurance to an audit committee, what are we doing to respond to this new threat?
Absolutely. So I can share. I'll speak with the risk owner offline and share with with members the output of that in terms of the risk detail, the mitigation, the controls that are in place, and the various governance touch points. That's obviously that this risk would have been discussed.
And I should say we are keeping in mind things that we might bring to a deep dive, to a discussion. That may be a good example. Sorry, I think Ed was next.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Aldo, for bringing this report. Very easy to kind of process and understand, and I appreciate that, so thank you. On just sticking with CRR 61, just so it's clear, the 2 initial incidents, did they take place before or after the risk was reduced the quarter before from 15 to 10?
So the 2 have been in the same quarter, the incidents, and obviously the third one just outside of that quarter. So it's 3 within just over 3 months.
Okay, so it was after the risk was reduced, then the 3 incidents happened, and the risk has come back up. Okay, just checking the sequencing on that, because that's obviously quite critical to understanding of the risk. I've had to save other things for. It is a potential candidate for a deep dive. I think the affordability of adult social care is another good candidate for as well, for what it's worth. Just got 2 other little questions. So on the improving risks, is it CR12 around emergency planning? Could you just briefly summarise how the risks have become less critical and less major simultaneously?
Yeah, so the overall exposure from likelihood impact has gone down in the sense of the business continuity team now have a consistent set of plans across the organisation that are in a uniform format, and there is now a plan around those to test those plans at both corporate, director and service level as well. So the risk has improved in that respect.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, just on page 107, this is more just for information and reference, I think. Could you just remind me why of the non-CR risks that are not brought to attention to this committee? So there's 9 which score 20 or higher, so would otherwise be in the remit. Could you just briefly summarise why those aren't provided as standard to this audit committee, and if they can be provided as just as a matter of general reference?
Absolutely. So obviously this is as of Q4. So the new enterprise risk management policy dictates a new way of scoring. So at the minute, the scoring is very binary in terms of 28, and then there's a manual process in terms of determining whether that is a corporate risk or whether it's an operational service level risk, etc. So going forward, there'll be a management assessment in there to determine, well, actually it's scored accordingly, therefore it is a corporate risk, or actually it sits at an operational level. So those that we've identified, the 9, they do get discussed at both EDM and DMT meetings in terms of should they be escalated, but the nature of them is very operational.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Patrick was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this presentation and for waiting through the whole committee. I would just like to talk about the static risks, please, with my previous questions having been gazumped nicely by Councillors Coombs and Fraser. I'm glad that we're reviewing these static risks, and I'm sorry, my screen's glitching on me. Excuse me. So static risk is defined as having remained unchanged for 3 or more reporting periods. I would see it as if we've got a risk that's static, something's probably going wrong somewhere, because if it's deteriorating, that indicates it perhaps is gone beyond our capability to manage, and that there are reasons for that. And if it's getting better, that indicates that what we're doing is working to mitigate it. If a risk is static, does that could indicate to me that we're not, whatever we're doing to try and mitigate it isn't working, or it's potentially the risk is growing alongside our attempts to mitigate it. Why? It's disappointing, I suppose, that we do have so many static risks in that regard then, that the things we're trying to bring in to mitigate them aren't working. And I was wondering if, I appreciate I don't sit on the committee usually, will there be a bit of a deep dive or a bit more explanation about what those risks are, why they haven't been improving, and what's being done to try and kick things up a notch?
Absolutely. So again, in the new risk management policy, the management assessment effectively will give context around some of those risks around if it's remained static, is that because we're not doing enough or actually doing everything we can, but external environment, external factors means that what we're doing is just, is a lot just to stand still. So certainly reporting going forward will give more context around how static a risk is, yeah.
Thank you. I think there's certain elements like the 2 which are currently have been at 28 for a while. Yeah. I think we all appreciate the situation there is a long-term one, and it's going to remain high until some of the structural factors influencing them change. But I think maybe for some of the more middling rank ones, it could be really interesting to do a dive in there and see what is actually needed to start bringing those numbers down. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we have the next question from David.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go to Appendix A and talk about CR 43, possible failure to deliver the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement by the 1st of March, settlement 1 by March 2027. I'm surprised that that risk hasn't changed because the deadline for delivering CRSTS projects has been moved back to March 29. So I was expecting that risk to change slightly, not remain static. Are you up to date on all the data associated with that risk, please?
I will speak with the risk owner and provide an update accordingly. So I'll share that offline after the meeting, yeah.
Thank you.
I think we had a question from Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little point, and thank you very much for this. It's good to see, you know, what you've already provided to us in our meetings coming to fruition, and the better format and the methodology, you know, coming through. It's great that. Just a little point, I mean, I'm not sure if anybody else finds this odd, but the CRR acronym seems to be getting used for both the Corporate Risk Register and the Corporate Risk Report. And I would, you know, I'm slightly confused on that. But anyway, that's a small point. My main point, Chair, is actually about the content of this register. I mean, I can see, you know, I mean, most of these risks, except for the finance one, the workforce one, and the cyber security one, are escalated risks, if I'm reading this right. And I mean, I'm just curious and maybe not concerned yet about where are we capturing the strategic risks and the external risks, and you know, where are we using, and where is maybe the leadership team using what you gave us in the last meeting, I think, you know, that risk management tool where you can, you know, you've got a great little guide in there about how to identify risks, including indeed those that are external to the organisation, you know, and doing some horizon planning, you know, scanning, etc. And I'm just a little bit concerned that we're missing some of the real strategic corporate risks that should be on this register. And I'm certainly not one for wanting a big long register, but where are those risks?
So the workshop that we did with the CLB a few weeks ago was to address that exact point. And even last week at the Audit and Risk Board, I presented the proposed or the output risks from that workshop in comparison with the current corporate risk register. One, there are some gaps in the current register, and the new proposed risks will certainly cover those gaps, but I think the overall feel will be more strategic going forward. So we're in the process of calibrating the output from the CLB workshop with the current register, but basically to reposition some of these risks so they read more strategically as well, because I fully appreciate some of them are quite operational in that sense, and the spread of risks in terms of Bristol's exposure, like I said, there are some gaps. So the Q1 register will have a different look and feel.
Okay, so are we saying then in our next meeting, or your next risk report, will start to address what my question?
The next report will look different because it will reflect your new model that is being implemented.
The output from the CLB workshop, the strategic risks, will be reflected in the corporate risk register, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from my colleagues? No. And have my colleagues thought about items that we would like to bring to the deep dive session? As I say, you can come back after the meeting, but I just want to ask if people had identified anything while they were looking at this report. Nick?
I think the obvious place to start is to use the metric which is in front of us that tells us what the most significant, most likely risks are.
Well, I mean, the most significant risk is the housing one, but we've had a deep dive on that, so I was presuming that we wouldn't re-deep dive that.
The next most significant is around the failure of highways infrastructure.
We have had a briefing on highways infrastructure. It wasn't part of the committee meeting, but it was a individual briefing. James and then Ed.
mean, I know I'm quite new here. I think the one, if we were going to do a deep dive, that I'd be very interested in is the failures in the CDM frameworks. Why has there been 3 critical incidents? What is causing that deterioration? But as I said, I would be very interested, and I would agree with Nick, except that it sounds like I've got to go back and do some reading. So I'd also ask if that information is not being published, if that could be shared with me on the risks as well.
And Ed.
Yep, so Councillor Crawford, I'll commit to sharing with you the information about CR60. I know what that is. I'd like to see information on CR58. Again, that'd be helpful. I'm going to disagree with you, Nick, on which ones are prioritised. I think the ones at the highest are the ones that we are more naturally likely to scrutinise in the first place. And I think there'll be some, maybe something in the middle that don't actually get as much attention in the first place. So, you know, 51 could be a good candidate, the financial sustainability of adult social care. So I think sometimes we might have an assumption that these will all be to national pressures, and so that could mean we spend less time looking at that kind of thing, but actually there may be new or emerging factors that are worth looking at. So that's a good one. And 61 could be a good one because of the volatility of it. Yeah, I think it might be helpful to spend a little bit of time actually thinking about which ones I'd like to take forward, and it might not be the obvious candidates.
Absolutely. So, not Jeremy, but actually Alison will then be in touch in terms of voting, maybe, or expressing opinions on a few options in the next couple of weeks. That will be okay.
Yeah, I think we need to give the risk owner enough time to prepare. So if we could do this in the next 2 weeks, that would be okay. Because it's coming to the July meeting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, maybe by the end of next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could that just be recorded in email as an action for us to pick up?
Yeah,
So
no, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Are we happy to accept Aldo's report on corporate risks? Thank you very much, Aldo. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you to all the viewers at home, and thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next time.